Good afternoon. Welcome to the board of Ebbsfleet Development Corporation. Quite a milestone for certainly for myself personally here and a number of others. But we are meeting in person here in Ebbsfleet in our offices, which is the door wide open, which is fantastic to be here. We've got one of our board members and our chief executive screen joining us remotely, but mainly CM, so the executive. So it's fantastic to be here. So why don't we just start with first part of this? Do we have any registered apologies for absence?
Councillor cards.
Right. Okay. So Councillor.
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Chairman, I will have to excuse myself for 10 minutes at about 1:30, if I may, but I'll be back in case you see me disappear.
Well, it's a call from number 10, perhaps, Daniel.
I've scheduled it to fit in with the board meeting as far as possible. No, I don't think it's a call from number 10.
Right. One can hope. Anyway, also I think we may have apologies from not a board member, but is joining us until he is formally appointed, Councillor Derek Murphy from Kent County Council. He had hoped to join us, but will be unable to join us today. Do we have any declarations of interest? Yeah. Yes. Daniel.
Well, I do, but whether Neil wants to go first, but I'm a member of the EDC's planning committee. If at a meeting of the board of the corporation or of one of its committees, I participate in any discussion or decisions promoting or assisting in the promotion of applications made by EDC for Planning Commission, I will recuse myself from participating in consideration of or determination of that matter at any meeting of the Planning Committee. Any observations I make at the board meeting should not be taken as an indication as to how I might vote when considering any planning application. I will consider any planning application at the appropriate time after consideration of the application documents, representations, officers' report, and other relevant material.
Thank you, Daniel. Ian. Neil.
Simon, I make a similar declaration, slightly different. I will not participate in any discussion or decisions at the board in promoting or assisting in the promotion of applications made by EDC for Planning Commission, but I've been advised that participation in discussion on today's agenda items will not preclude me from considering any applications, and I repeat Daniel Moylan's declaration in relation to observations made today.
Great, thank you very much. Are there any other declarations of interest? No? Thank you. Then that brings us to agree the Part 1 minutes of our board meeting on the 21st of July. Those are in front of us. Can I assume that everyone is happy that those are a true and fair record of the meeting which took place then? Great.
Agreed.
Thank you very much, everyone. That then moves us through to board action log, which appears to be very up to date, actually. Doesn't appear to be anything, James, unless you want to flag that for us, that we should be particularly concerned about that.
No.
All right. I can see we've got the final version of the corporate plan. I think that's something in AOB that we'll just ask the board to approve, and then we will finalise the work just to get ready to distribute that. But otherwise, our action list appears to be particularly up to date, which really brings us into our first report, which is our Chief Executive's Part 1 report. Ian isn't with us in the room, he's on the screen. Ian, welcome. Can you please take us through this?
Hi, thank you, Simon, and sorry I'm not there in person. As probably some of you can tell, my voice is rather more husky than it normally is. I've been suffering with a nasty chest infection over the last week or 10 days, and I thought it would be better if I was not in the room. I'm assured by lots of tests that I don't have COVID, but nevertheless, I've not been terribly well. So, but I am down the road in Ebbsfleet. So it would be nice to have been with you all today. Yeah, my report's fairly brief, Simon. Just in terms of the first couple of paragraphs, we are all adapting to the new ways of working, and I think I particularly welcome any feedback after this meeting around the use of the video conferencing, how well it works for people like Daniel that are joining today on video, and for you in the room as well. We're quite conscious that we may have to refine and tinker as we go along and just make sure things are working really well. But any observations or feedback after today would be very welcome. In paragraph 3, I just highlight some slight resourcing pressures for us at the moment. We have had an incredibly consistent period of staff over the last two or more years. Very few leavers. We've had a number of joiners, but as they say about London buses, they don't come along on their own. So we've actually had a couple of people, 2 or 3 people, leave for various different reasons in the last couple of months. We have got some recruitment that we've done, but we're waiting for some joiners in October. So that together with all the other arrangements around managing COVID has certainly means that I think at the moment we're under a bit of extra pressure as a team. As a relatively small organisation, a couple of people have been absent for a few months, or some gaps in our resource plan. Obviously, we feel that much more than a bigger organisation might do. We're obviously, as you would expect and hope, that we're managing through those pressures, but it is meaning that we're having to make some choices at the moment, which in order to manage us through this transition period. So that's all in hand, just to reassure you, but there are, as I say, some things that we're having to prioritise on. Just then, on the spending review process, just to update, we are expecting announcements from the Chancellor about the 3rd week of October. I think it's about October 27th. So our submission will be part of the submission from the Ministry of Housing and Local Government. I think that is pretty much now in. Submissions were due around about today from the ministries. So there will now be a period of reflection and no doubt discussion between Secretaries of State and the Treasury. We have made a robust submission. We think it's well evidenced. We have made set out an ambitious programme for the next phase of delivery at the Garden City, with some quite significant capital projects in there. So we remain hopeful and confident that we'll achieve a satisfactory outcome to that spending review submission. Obviously incredibly important for us as an organisation, because it will set the resources for us for the next few years. Just a couple of things to highlight in terms of the area-based priorities, which have got some short notes here. On Ebbsfleet Central, the outline business case has gone in, and it looks now like we will have an ISC, which is the MHCLG's investment subcommittee, which will look over this submission. We think that will be in the 1st week of October now. We had hoped it would be in September, but it looks like it'll be the 1st week of October. Just to highlight as well, the few sort of short sentences on Northfleet Riverside don't do justice to all the amount of work that the teams are doing at the moment, particularly around the outline planning application that we've been made, and all the work that we're doing in response to comments that we've received from some statutory consultees and indeed our own planning officers around that. So there's a huge amount of work being done on that at the moment. As I say, the few short sentences here don't really do justice to the amount of work that's going on there. And that's probably it for me, Simon. Very happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much, Ian. Louise, just one second. Councillor John Burden has just joined us. He obviously got caught up in a little bit of the traffic locally. Welcome, John. Do you have any declarations of interest for the meeting? Okay, great. Good to see you here. Louise.
Thanks, Ian. First of all, I just wanted to say that having come back and being here in the room physically, even as somebody who's been involved for such a long period of time, like doing the site tour at the end of last month and then being back today, it makes you realise how much better it is to all be in the room together. So as much as possible, I feel like metaphorically and physically being back in the room. So that's great, and I appreciate everybody's efforts in enabling us to do that. A quick question on the staffing, Ian. Is it spread across, I know it's a small number, but are the levers spread across the organisation or are they clustered? And is there a common reason for departure, or is it all very ad hoc? Is there a trend, really, is what I'm saying?
There's certainly no concentration. In fact, I think the three levers are all in different teams, actually, from different directorates. Is there one of them was here on a short-term contract anyway, providing a maternity cover, adoption cover, and in terms of the other two, both those members of staff have been long-serving members of staff, and have taken other opportunities. Certainly one of them is very much a career advancement, which is great news for that individual. So yeah, I can't. I mean, there's only three, so I don't think there's not enough there to sort of say that there's a trend, but they're definitely from different parts of the organisation.
Thank you, Bob.
Just to follow up, Ian, what's the recruitment market like? Basically, how are we doing in replacements?
Yeah, well, so we've done some recruitment before the summer, and because of notice periods, etc., those individuals haven't yet joined us formally. They will do before the next meeting. It's quite tough, I would say, Bob. I mean, for some roles we've had good numbers of interest, and in fact, for the two that we did recruit, we had good interest. We've also been out for another role, which was again a maternity cover. We went out for a 2-year contract, recognising that getting sort of 12 months contract was probably going to be really difficult, and we had very low response to that. So yeah, it's quite tough. It does depend, it's a little bit role dependent. We've been able to recruit some roles in finance as well recently with very strong candidates, so it's a bit variable.
All right, thank you, Ian. Any other comments? Perhaps a couple of pieces from myself. I had an opportunity to wander around Northfleet recently with John and one of his colleagues, Lauren, and to see areas where the development corporation, both inside the red line but also outside the red line, look to improve things for the local community there. So that was very useful for me and enlightening. So look forward to how we can work together to do more for the residents of Northfleet and those who are not within the immediate auspices of the development corporation. So that was very valuable, and we got an early win there. I think we were going to get a kids' play area sorted out quickly. So well done to Countryside for reacting to my picture on WhatsApp. So good on them. And Ian mentioned the spending review. I think, look, we put in place through the Ministry of Housing, Communities, Local Government, I think an excellent bid. One which we will be able to deliver on, and we're ready to deliver on. We're ready to press the button on that, which is not always easy to say when you're dealing with brownfield regeneration. So we are really ready to roll on that. It's ambitious. We've got a tremendous team here, executive and non-executive. So we will let that work its way through the spending review, which is taking place across government at the moment, and we travel in optimism. for the end result there, but we're certainly ready to go. So exciting times, hopefully, for the Development Corporation of Garden City and existing and future residents. And otherwise, I think a good report from Ian. Any final comments before we just note that?
We should note, Chairman, that's just the first board meeting in our new office as well, isn't it? We've never met here before. I was suddenly thinking.
Right, okay.
I was looking out the window thinking that's changed, and I realised.
You're right.
All right, so we've christened the building.
Yeah, we've christened the building as well, which is significant.
All right, too many firsts. All right, good. Well, as you pointed out. All right, so we're duly noting Chief Executive's report. That then takes us on to the second item, Ebbsfleet Living. Kevin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This month's report basically highlights the activity in the Garden City over the summer. So we didn't have a meeting in August, so it just allows us to sort of collectively see what's happened in the Garden City over that period. Obviously, we've moved from social distancing restrictions in July to more open opportunities over the period. And an Annex 1 I've managed to include some images of some of the activity that the Garden City's seen over the summer, which included the summer gathering, our Cloud9 Festival, and a number of other initiatives, which have actually by far been the largest and best attended events we've had in the 5 or 6 years of the Development Corporation to date. Over 700 at the Cloud9 Festival, which was facilitated by the Grand in Gravesend with us, and again over 500 at our summer gathering, Picnic in the Park, which is very much designed in partnership with our Community Board. Community Board helped us prioritise what people wanted to see there. What people sort of asked for was holiday at home for those who couldn't go and travel, so we very much celebrated that kind of approach by having all the things you normally see at the seaside or in your normal summer holidays brought into the Garden City Park. So again, got really good feedback from people on those events. We also had a meeting of the Community Board on the 31st of August, where again we kind of had feedback on what worked and what didn't work in those events, and thought about what they'd like to see in the future. We hope to see more activity coming from them through that. Over the same period, a couple of really interesting landmark openings in the Garden City as well. We had the first pharmacy, which opened in mid-July at Castle Hill. Great acclaim, a local Kent business, and it was really great to see a local Kent business growing in the Garden City. People were very glad to see that facility here. And our landmark third school in the Garden City opened on the 6th of September at Ebbsfleet Green. The official opening will be on the 25th of September. But again, it's fantastic to see all of our neighbourhoods starting to have schools coming forward. And again, last but not least, was the first ever Garden City Bake Off, very seasonal, by church and other officials, which we had as part of the gathering. And we want to see that as an ongoing event where lots of people of all ages have been showing their culinary skills in the Garden City.
Great.
Happy to take any questions from you.
Okay. Thank you very much for that. Board, are there any questions, observations on the excellent work ongoing? Yes, David.
Kevin, can you tell us a little bit more about the mental health fund?
Yeah.
Because obviously it's gone down extremely well and been extremely necessary. It's unclear here, I guess, the period over which we think we will be funding this, whether we're working with the local NHS partners or CS to continue this provision.
It's very much a reaction. If you recall, last year we did a learning from lockdown and COVID response. From that, we had a number of programs, including this outdoor school classrooms that we're continuing to deliver. We had a crisis response for Ebbsfleet Academy, where we've helped them bring in a person 2 to 3 days a week to help with mental health in that school, but that's very much an 18-month provision. And the two I think you're referring to, David, are the Together Along Porch Light provision, which are open to residents in the Garden City, either virtually or in person. We've very much done that as a 12-month target to try and really help with the absolute issues with COVID. But we are working with the NHS Trust to make sure that is something that becomes sustainable in the longer term. We're also working with Ebbsfleet Academy to make sure they can have a person to help with mental health issues in the school longer term. So it was very much crisis response to COVID, but we are working within the programs to make sure that at the end of them there is some provision by everybody that not be funding necessarily those few programs beyond that period.
Great, thank you.
Right, Louise.
Just one quick one. During the pandemic and your outreach in terms of this activity, so much has been dependent on good sort of IT connectivity. have you sensed in all your dealings with the community that they feel that they are as well provisioned in IT terms here as anywhere else? There's been a particular issue that's blocked people connecting electronically or digitally. There's nothing we need to think about there.
There was, through the resident satisfaction survey, which we reported on last month, and the Learning from Lockdown survey, people reported that in their home they felt generally happy with the quality of internet and service provision. Obviously, there has been lack of service provision outside the home. So in our village centres and public realm, we don't have particularly good provision in that. And through these events, for example, we're running, some of the existing public realm hasn't had things like electricity and lighting. So we're learning lessons from that to make sure the public realm projects that we're going to bring forward, the community buildings we're looking at, that we do ensure we have things like lighting, electricity in the public realm, and that we have service provision within that. So I think the answer is, in the home, it's relatively good and people are quite satisfied. Outside the home, we haven't done anything in existing public realm that helps, but generally coverage is quite good in the area.
Okay, that's good, because I was thinking that during lockdown, well, cafes were closed, and sometimes you go to a cafe and people can connect when they're there, and the libraries the same, libraries were closed for a long time. Sometimes people who don't have it in their homes, that's where they go. So, if people have had less access, as you say, outside. So
a very strong feeling from the co-design sessions that we've run on the community buildings is that people do want to use those community buildings exactly as you've described, as touchdown spaces to meet and work. I think people are generally seeing much more future working from home, but not necessarily working from home.
Totally.
So I think the use of the public realm, the use of our community buildings to work from is increasingly becoming important, and we're responding to that in the brief that we're going to bring forward for those.
Yeah, I think that's an excellent point, because it will be a real sales feature, and to build this is a great place to live as well.
And it draws people out, it creates
absolutely.
community as well.
It's probably the single most important thing that's been fed back in the most recent interactions we've had is staff move to work from home and try to work in a different way, and making sure the city serves them.
Fantastic. Yes.
Ask on that. It's one thing providing internet connectivity for people in community buildings. Has any thought being given to providing the hardware so that people who don't have access to their own computers and equipment can go to a community building and get some form of access, plus potentially some help as to how to use it? I mean, there probably aren't many people living in the Garden City who don't know, aren't familiar with the use of computers and internet access, but maybe some. Do we know whether this demand?
Well, we've been very conscious of digital exclusion being an issue over the last period. We know we've got a reasonable response rate when we go online for engagement, but we get much better engagement when we go in person. So we will be returning to in-person engagement as much as we can. Things like the Alcaden Hub will include a lifelong learning centre specifically for older people and trying to get education along in that. So some of those buildings we will be looking in more detail about how exactly the different user groups can use them. And I think it's been really useful that we've done the evaluation and learning during COVID. It's probably going to help us with briefs for some of these buildings moving forward. But in terms of the services, the first real service that will be coming will be through the Lifelong Learning Centre at the end of 2023.
If you are a person who's excluded digitally, what happens until 2023?
As I said, we will be returning to doing a lot of our engagement and events in person as we're allowed to, or people having to engage with us digitally. But in terms of using the general role of people getting people to engage with the internet, we haven't taken a role in lead in that to date.
That's where I was thinking about the library situation, because our local library at home has computers and access and someone there to help someone who is digitally excluded at home, and we don't have that type of facility.
No, but perhaps we should be thinking about that.
Interesting, the library and the Lifelong Learning Centre will both be in the Alcaden Hub, so it will become a main focus for that, and we're trying to rediscover as the day services role, the people will be as well. So this gives us a real interesting project to focus a lot of these ideas on. But I do take your point, and for example, Laura, the work that we're just going to be introduced to in a second, is starting to think about how we reach the harder to reach groups in some of our projects.
Excellent. I'm going to bring in Nick and then John.
So, as a planning authority, we get to what we should be discussing about what our attitude is to 5G in the city. Decisions, strategy for the public realm that we're going to be owning.
That's a good point. Can I just ask Mark there? Mark, where are we on a sort of broadband, ultra high speed broadband connectivity from a policy perspective and the like?
Yeah, I mean, we did quite a lot of work on this in the early days, and actually Julian might get better first on the detail than me. But when we were engaging with the developers and house builders, I know that, for example, on Eastern Quarry, there is a requirement to provide an action plan around connectivity for broadband. Generally, the feedback from the developers is that people generally don't buy homes around this area unless they have that connected now. So they are coming forward with broadband enabled. Certainly in terms of Wi-Fi, we've been looking at telecommunications recently, looking at Eastern Quarry and Street Green, and having engagement with the landowner there to make sure that there's coverage but not too many masts. So yeah, it's definitely on the agenda. We probably need to be looking at coverage on from a telecoms perspective in terms of other areas of Ebbsfleet. But I think that when we looked at the work before, we'll be okay.
We need a planning policy on 5G. And a number of smaller masts, because the density of 5G masts isn't so intense. But I'll come back to the earlier point that the public realm that we own, that we create, should all be Wi-Fi enabled. The 10 million people walk onto the Wembley estate of 85 acres, plus the stadium, and everybody has Wi-Fi. Free Wi-Fi and that collection, and if we're really that knowledge base and that data is a incredible way to run that efficient and smart city.
Yeah, you make a very good point here, because when I was the leader of the Royal Borough of Windsor and Maidenhead, we brought in a service provider to provide, well, free Wi-Fi across. Windsor was extremely attractive for 6 million international visitors a year. But then it extended into Maidenhead, so there was actually a kind of a branded Wi-Fi, free Wi-Fi provision. Julia.
Yeah, so just a short while ago, I can't remember, probably 2 years, Kevin, we did a whole series of strategies, and one of those was the digital element. I think we're in the gap now between having a draft document there and understanding it. We have specifically, Ian and myself have had a number of meetings with obviously BT Openreach, who generally provide the core infrastructure. They have provided us with free connectivity, not only to commercial premises because of the nature of the Garden City, but they also indicated that there would be free connectivity to any public realm that we had as well.
Yeah.
So we're at the point at which we haven't got any parks that we're actually bringing forward at the moment. So we're in the gap between having a documentation, having talked to one of the key providers, and bringing forward those business cases for that public realm. So we've kind of got it.
All right, could I suggest, can we bring forward a strategy paper to the board which deals with digital connectivity across the Garden City and where we are at the moment, and how we could be best in class, from a policy and infrastructure perspective, given that I think Nick has correctly said, this is an ideal place to have absolutely state-of-the-art to facilitate hybrid working and to really set ourselves in the top tier of that. So it would be good to know where we are and what initiatives we could look at to take us to the absolute premier offering here. Ian, is that okay to look into that? See what happens when you're not in the room, Ian.
Yeah, I know. I've got my fingers crossed all the time. No, that's fine. Thank you very much. Yeah.
Okay. Julie, you want to come back in again?
Yeah, the only thing I would say is I've got particular staffing pressures within the team, so I do need a bit of space and time to be able to do that properly. I'd rather do something properly than
Totally.
do something half.
Well, I think we've got to look.
Come back on this point.
Yes.
Our planning policy and our strategy for 5G.
Yeah.
Because we're the planning authority. And we need to have a policy, and when we are launching developments via third parties, we should be thinking about how is 5G going to serve that community, etc.
Okay.
Yeah, just
I'm sure that Mark will answer it. We are the decision-making authority, but Gravesham and Dartford are policy-making authority, so I think we would have to deal with this carefully, and maybe it's an opportunity, because Gravesham and Dartford are promoting new plans, for us to work together with them and to do something.
exactly what I was going to say.
You two are working seamlessly together.
Yes.
All right, so just to move on from this, and then I'll bring John in. So I think this paper, which will come back to the board when you've had the time to do the right, full, diligent job on it, should extend to our planning policy side of things as well. So the board absolutely understands where we are and where we can go to, and we'll suggest where that would be in our forward plan. But that was a good conversation. John, can I bring
in on that conversation?
Okay, yeah, come on.
On the issue of planning, I've got no problem with Gravesham being involved. We're trying to control 5G, having a policy document on that. I wish you well on your ambitions. We find that very little control. The government's given a lot of power to put up masts wherever they want, however they want, and whenever they want, almost regardless of what we think. So if you've got more ability to control it in the EDC area, I'd like to know how, and I'll join you in that if we can. So I'm more than willing to work with you, with our planners, to try and find a way forward.
Do wonder whether, as part of the development, some of it could be integral to the structures of efficiency. If the government sits in an area more widely.
Control it by limited distance between zones and keeping the statutory providers off. So if you invite BT, for instance, onto land, there's control, because what happens is what they decide to happen, you have no influence on it. You create the grid inside you have a great opportunity to avoid any obsolescence, because you certainly control the process from the outset. You don't get dumped with copper.
I'll go back to what I said. Welcome you to talk to our planners, because we find that's not the case. They come onto a raw virgin bit of land and put masts up and give us a limited time to object with a substance to the objection. Failing that, they put up what they want. That's the problem with us. That's the way it was set. But on the issue of connectivity, my issue, I don't disagree with it. I've been in some of those you're referring to, community engaging in it. It's been interesting how a number of residents, particularly in the older part of the EDC, have broadband width problems as opposed to connectivity. Two things are separate. They can get onto them, but if there are other people on that bandwidth, either kids in the house, and the bandwidth gets reduced so much, they can be in the meeting, but they're taking their screens off and everything else. They actually can then be in the meeting by reducing their bandwidth to take themselves. So we need to look at not just the connectivity, but bandwidth strengths.
Yeah, absolutely. I've been in modern apartment blocks where the broadband bandwidth is for the building, which is fine, apart from when everyone starts trying to stream stuff or download it in the evening, in which case it's completely hopeless and useless for residents. Mark.
If I could just quickly say, yeah, John, your experience about the providers and applications, I have a lot of experience with that from before. Luckily here, we've generally been removing lights on telecoms when the outlines are coming forward, therefore then that does give us the control. So that's what the difference is probably between some of the sites here.
I'd like to work with you on that.
Good. Well, we've had a good conversation there. Look forward to a paper in due course. It's really Quintain and Wembley, got a huge amount of experience there. So great. Okay. That then I think we're noting the paper. Thank you very much for that, Kevin. Then that brings us on to the next paper, which is Lara and Kevin, which is dealing with Skills and Employment Action Plan. So please take it away.
Yeah, I'm just going to set the context of where this paper has come from, and then Laura's going to bring us through the detail. So board members will recall in June 2019, we had a wide range of discussion on economic growth and inclusive growth in the Garden City. From that, we agreed 6 action areas to try and make sure that local residents, both residents arriving and people who are in existing communities, could benefit from some of the growth and the opportunities in the Garden City. One of those 6 actions was very much about looking at skills and employment opportunities, and we agreed to bring in a resource to try and drive that from the Garden City and with our partners. So I'm glad to say Lara Poole has joined us to take up that role for a 2-year fixed-term contract. Lara is specifically looking at one of the actions around driving and coordinating opportunities for skill and workforce in the Garden City. In her first 6 months, she's developed this work plan and action approach, which she's going to share with you in terms of highlights, and then we're both happy to take any questions on that. So over to Lara really to set out her action plan.
Good afternoon, everybody. It's really nice to meet you. I've not seen as many people within the building before either, so yeah, it's mirroring what Louise said about being here metaphorically and physically, so yeah. So in terms of the inclusive growth strategy that we've adopted at EDC, one of the areas around skills and employment, and what I'm looking to achieve, is to help local residents, whether they are adults or young people through schools, be upskilled, reskilled, and have the knowledge and skills required for employment within the Garden City, and to keep the economic growth within the local area in terms of financial growth, etc. So that's the main vision really of the programmes and where I'm coming from. I've taken a very intermediary and collaborative approach to this in terms of making sure that we are with not only local residents, the local authorities, job centres, various charities, networks, groups that are already established in this area, to make sure that we can then provide what is required by developers and well. So in terms of who we're looking to reach and who would benefit from the programmes that I've pulled together, I'm looking at the hardest to reach, the unemployed in the local area. So for example, there are 16 wards within Dartford and Gresham Borough, which is what I'm classifying as local, not a 10-mile radius, but the 2 boroughs. And there are 16 wards where unemployment is higher than the UK and the South East average. We've also got a large number of young people who are aged 16 to 24 who are classified as not in education, employment or training. You may have heard the expression NEETs. And in fact, in Gresham Borough, they have the 3rd highest rate of NEETs in the South East. So it really is a group of young people that we want to target to work. Plus, there's also within Gresham Borough a large number of women who are unemployed as well. So although we're not excluding anybody from any of the programmes, those are our primary targets of who we would like to work with and help them into employment. In terms of the programmes then, I've identified 4 programmes. One is a work-ready programme that will help those people in the local area, local residents, into work in a 3-stage programme, getting them work-ready, training them, and also giving them a taster session on site with our developers to be able to move into employment with the local developers. Looked at closing the loop there as well. There's no point training people if there's no jobs available. So I've engaged with Hayes Recruitment, for example, to offer those people who've been through our programme a place off their books. So when the phone call comes in from the site manager, then they will prioritise our local residents into the work that's available. Another programme is an education outreach programme, and that is very much a long-term pipeline of talent development programme So building awareness and aspirations with secondary schools, further education, universities for careers in the built environment. Also pulled together all of the jobs that are available currently in the local area onto a web page on our website, so that there is a one-stop shop, as it were, for people who are looking for work in the Garden City. They can find all those opportunities there. Otherwise, you'd have to go to all of the developers' websites and look at them individually. And the fourth programme is the Garden City Apprenticeship Scheme. Now I forget, we launched it yesterday. The Garden City Apprenticeship Scheme is designed for apprentices who are employed by developers, contractors, employers in the Garden City, and it's a support network, and it offers them more training as well, delivers them more skills, and it will give them opportunity to talk to the directors and staff within the EDC so that they understand what the other opportunities or career progression might be. And in return, we expect those apprentices to help us with our education outreach programme and our employability programmes. There's three ways of delivering these programmes. One is via direct investment ourselves, which is what many of those programmes are. I've also been working with Mark in the planning team about how we can put some of these obligations within Section 560s. And also with the current developers and contractors, I'm trying to get a baseline figure from them of what social value they're actually delivering at the moment, so that we can then measure how the impact of the programmes works over time. And in terms of the measurement, we're going to be using the social value portal to measure the impact of these programmes as well. And in terms of sustainability, I'm looking to work with those key groups that I mentioned earlier, but then longer term be able to extend the programmes to other target groups, deliver more programmes, and also perhaps even then move out of construction and look at other skills, perhaps digital skills, for example, as well.
Sorry, so the final your mind turn his mic off, please, if he's not speaking. It's very disrupting to hear everything going on this end, then something down there.
Okay. So, who's not muted?
Daniel.
Daniel, could you mute? Is that possible?
Mute?
Excellent, thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you, Daniel. Thank you.
Sorry, as a final point,
Muted up here.
in terms
What hearing anything down there?
in terms of funding, EDC has committed £100,000 of funding for this year's programme. Longer term, we'll be looking at other sources of funding. There's a lot of other government schemes that have come out, particularly post-COVID, so we'll be looking at trying to attract sources of funding. And we have, as example, worked with John and his team at Gratium to do a joint bid for that for a substantial amount of funding. Whether that's successful or not, we'll continue to look at other options for bringing funding and other partners in to try
When
and
do
help
you
us.
hear about that?
Very soon, hopefully.
Yeah, it should be.
So, just jump in there. So we're applying for a grant from Gratium.
No.
No.
Jointly applied to government.
Okay. So who will then manage that programme? Gratium. Okay. Covering.
We will work with you.
Okay. Right. Okay.
We work with anybody.
You can take that too.
Very flattering.
Turn this off, you know.
All right. Okay. Good. Nick, I think you wanted to come in. Did you? Bob, you wanted to come in.
No, I mean, this is really excellent. You could say 2019 was too late, actually, by the time we got to the point of actually sorting out what we were trying to do in this programme. It's obviously been delayed by COVID. But I really welcome this report. It's a really good report. And I'm really pleased because it's got this very, very focused action. So, again, going back to my previous experience in those places, this is so critical, particularly when things start to change in an area. Because the danger, obviously, is that we do change the area physically very, very well. And we create actually some jobs, but the people who get the jobs are not people who live here. And so many regeneration schemes make that mistake. And it's really, really critical that we do these things, some of which seem incredibly simple, like helping people prepare for work or interviews. Actually making sure you go to the interview, make sure they're dressed sensibly. CV stuff, all that really simple stuff. And of your 4 delivery programs, the one I really like is the bottom one on this report, the education outreach. And because so many people obviously have been failed by the statutory education system and are stuck in some point or other in their life, and being able to help them access education and training, and give them the confidence to do that, if they've been in a situation where it's not seemed sensible or attainable, is really, really important. So I really welcome this. I do hope we get the funding with Partners in Integration to be able to really drive on with this, because the timing is also now absolutely critical. Absolutely critical. Everything's about to start happening. The one, obviously, the sort of gold standard thing is the Construction Skills Academy. Now we are, for the first time, going to be, assuming we can get the funding, going to be in a position with the Absolute Central project to have sufficient critical mass of activity and working with partners on some build and some house builders as well, to actually be able to run a decent sized programme, which my experience is maybe from working in Liverpool, but you've got to get so much critical mass and so many partners to be able to make sure you can offer the opportunities and the different types of skill training, and to make it all work together and to get the right FE partner. And to get all that pulled together, you need a certain scale, which I didn't think we'd ever have here, but we didn't envisage being in a position really with Absolute Central if it comes off. I think that really gives us this opportunity if we can drive forward on that. It is a big task and it is quite revenue demanding, and we need partners who can help us in the private sector to make that work. But I really do welcome this. It's really, really nice, because it's 2 years since we have decided on the policy, and we agreed then that we'd really been remiss in not getting the policy sorted out. So very good luck with this, and pleased to see it.
Well, thank you, Nick.
So Rob said 98% of what I was going to say, and I chaired a private charity for minorities. We found that we could help 150 people a year to get jobs back, teaching them employment skills, but also understanding the cultural differences to help people actually react to an interview. A lot of cultures would actually look you in the eye, whereas a lot of interviewers feel that is a very negative scenario, but actually it's totally contrary to their culture. But what we've found was that when we changed tack and strategy by going into further education colleges and into the schools and teaching there, and some and told them not just the master classes, but also for the speakers to talk about their experiences and employment. And some we found could help 4,000 people a year. But I think having gone through that as a charity, we think we could really enjoy it.
Just like to pick up on one of those things.
And there's one other point I was going to ask you, which was you said it seems you've got quite a lot of data. And demographics, age, how can we get better data? What do you think you've got?
Well, I take my data from NOMIS and also work very closely with the Adult Skills Forum from Kent County Council, and there is able to break it down into ward for me. Comes out every 3 months, so you're always, 3 months, or you might be 3 months out of date. But in terms of the data, I think we've got enough to go on from now. I think when we expand the programmes and we do start looking at different characteristics, different diversity and ethnicity and equality, we may need to delve deeper into that data and statistics to identify who those particular participants might be. But for now, I think we're okay. Thank you.
All right. Excellent. David.
Yeah. You put an annex on the back which has our expectations, I guess, and targets.
Yes.
And one of them is the local labour one, but to about 10%. I'm just wondering how we've benchmarked that, because that could either sound very low, 10%, or could sound very ambitious, and maybe very low in 2 years' time or 3 years' time. So I'm just wondering how we have set ourselves ambitious targets? Because from what you've described here, these are quite important interventions that we're making, with a small population, I suppose. And so I'm just wondering whether, for instance, 10% sort of satisfies our ambition in this area, or whether we need to look at those targets.
So I took all of the figures from various organisations such as Kent County Council, government recommendations. I'm working with the Careers Enterprise Company around school engagement, for example. So they are the sort of standard figures that we use. Yes, I would agree that 10% is quite low if you term local as being 5-10 miles, but because we're looking at the two boroughs specifically, then 10% that was a reasonable target. We can increase that in the future, but they are all benchmarks that are used across the.
But I think what it did is it reminded me the importance of having some of these metrics that we as a board see on a regular basis, kind of to get the dashboard, but actually that we pick the right metrics to determine whether we're successful or not.
Yeah.
And that we tailor our approach to whatever the need is. Because we just had the unemployment levels come out, and that may bring a different perspective to bear, or different emphasis to bear as to which lever we think we should put in. So I think it's useful to set the right metrics and monitor against them and get those done.
Yeah, and this is where the baseline figure right now is really important to understand what the social value is that developers are delivering at the moment, and by use of the social value portal that was agreed at the last board, I believe, we should be able to then measure that moving forward as well.
It's also based on our current resource, so we can do it within the resources we've got. Should we get more resources in the future, attract other partners, then we can be more ambitious.
Right. Thank you, John.
Just on, I obviously agree, Taylor, we're trying to get people into jobs and skill-based, lifting aspirations, totally. I like the paper, but what I would say is a couple of things. One, I'm not a fan of your paragraph 3.1 where you say the jobs will be put online, because a lot of people in the area won't know to go online to find a job. It's not where they go. I certainly wouldn't have thought coming online to an EDC website to find a job locally, and yet I'm reasonably IT literate, but I wouldn't have occurred to me to look at that site for all the jobs. So you're going to put them all there. You may not find people looking at it unless you find another way of telling people about it, which then takes me to my second point. You've almost got two completely different sets of people you're trying to deal with. The EDC community are relatively new incoming people, they're transient, they've got jobs, they're reasonably well connected, and they know how they're moving forward. Even their kids will be. What you're then reaching out to is a community beyond that, and they're not that type of community. And two things. One, that set of community will have historic educational needs that you will need to be aware of to address when you're trying to promote them. But because of that also, you've got to be very careful with the language you use, I suggest. If you start, the feedback I'm getting, certainly past Northland, is the language coming out of the EDC is you're trying to gentrification of the area. You're trying to push them out to get your people in, or whatever your people are. I'm not sure what they are. I'm sure they've still got 2 arms, 2 legs, a head and a brain and can engage like anybody else. But it's that community feel that they're being pushed out because the new community want their houses, want their jobs. It just always happens anywhere. So you've got to be careful the language you use to engage with them. So whilst this is good in itself, it almost needs broken into your thought process into 2 parts of how do you work with the EDC community and how do you work with the community beyond, but not using a language that disenfranchises them and makes them feel unloved.
Yeah, look, I think John makes a very good point there, and it's probably the trip that we had around walk that we had in Northfleet. There are, undoubted pockets of deprivation there, where we need to work very hard to improve the life chances for individuals there and frankly to make that away in good quality jobs. So whatever we can do through this initiative, and when I think to David's point, you know, particularly when we are letting contracts where there is an apprenticeship, you know, sort of offer from people who are looking to contract with us, we should be, you know, very aspirational for what they can do for the local community. And absolutely, you know, we are not trying to gentrify communities here. We want to lift and level up, to use expressions. You know, points are very well made. I listened to BBC Radio 4 Today programme. Extraordinary. You know, if you have a driving qualification and you start driving now, you know, that is the most in-demand skill set out there. And your starting salary is £40,000 to £50,000 now. It's going to sound pretty appealing to someone who's got a social sciences degree and 50,000 of debt coming out of university. So, you know, there are tremendous opportunities there as the labour market changes. And, you know, so anything we can do to help people locally, we should be doing. It sounds like, you know, you're on the road to doing it.
Certainly in our area, you've literally got a timber fence between the EDC and the deprived, one of the most deprived wards in Kent. A timber fence, that's all it is. And that's quite startling when you walk around the area. Yes,
yeah, indeed. There's more we need to do work outside the red line as well as inside the red line as best we can to help everyone locally to benefit from the investment which is coming in.
Community cohesion is one of the objectives as well. Skills.
Can I ask a question when we talk about our community buildings as well, the extent to which, what feedback have we had on them, those being kind of, you know, used for employment hubs, training, CV preparation, interview technique, all of this, are these things which we're envisaging that they would be able to be used for job clubs, etc., etc.?
I'm envisaging using lots of local community buildings throughout both of the boroughs, not necessarily boroughs here in Ebbsfleet. So places like the library at the Hive, the ground, the community centres, those types of places where we can go to people rather than expect people to come to us.
But I suppose the point I'm making, if we're building extremely nice community centres within the Garden City, those would also be available to offer those types of,
Absolutely, but I think outreach first is the primary.
Yeah. So the long-term ambition is that the spaces in community buildings are very flexible for various uses. Okay, the Albion Hub will have the job centre function, but it doesn't necessarily have to be a job centre in the old way of job centre. You will see the central living room being the place where you can work for jobs and other things. So kind of rethinking how people access and offer. Like you were saying, John, awareness is one of the key objectives that has to go with this, and a management and awareness plan is really key.
Okay.
You'll find a lot of language issues and educational issues out there. I am dyslexic as it happens, and I find some of this stuff on time very hard work. And a lot of people I know have got dyslexia, autism, but I'll admit to it, a lot of people won't. And that's the problem facing.
Right. Good. So we've got a paper in front of us to endorse the action plan. I'm just wondering when we would hear back from you on progress and impact.
We're happy to come back on a regular basis, whatever you think is appropriate to kind of update on that. Obviously, the programme is just starting to get going, so maybe give it 6 months.
6 months? Can we go for an update in 6 months? Yeah. Okay, great. So I'm going to assume that everyone's happy to endorse the action plan. Thank you very much for all the hard work on this. That's great. Mark, communications report.
I do have to start off by saying that it's great to meet half of you at least who are new members, including you, Simon.
Yeah.
So
that's great to meet some.
Once. Yeah. So there's not a lot to add to my report, but in terms of media, first of all, our press release on the planning application for the first custom-built homes in Ebbsfleet Garden City got a lot of attention. It was on local TV and media and trade press, including Property Week as well. All in all, the name Ebbsfleet Garden City was seen by an estimated 13.8 million people in the last month. There's website success as well. So in July, when we didn't have a meeting, there was 9,308 users, individual users, and 7,527 individual users in August. So we've got to bear in mind that is the highest figure we've ever had for August. 7,527 people is incredible, because most people, even through a pandemic, go away on holiday. So I'll take time off with their kids and they don't look at the website. So that's particularly pleasing. And I should just mention that we have set up a website, a web page for Lara's apprentice scheme, and that's up live and running now. And I'll bring a report back on that next month.
Great, that's excellent. Are there any comments, board?
Sam, just not on this point, but just on a general point. Somebody pointed out to you, obviously my systems know I'm involved in Expenditure Exam Corporation. If I just Google randomly on somebody else's machine, just Expenditure Exam Corporation isn't the first thing that comes up. It's nearly always Expenditure United or Expenditure International Station or something else.
If you're just doing Expenditure, yes,
yeah,
it will do. If you Google Expenditure Garden City,
yeah, it's quick.
We do come up.
Yeah. So there's no way we can get any higher up the system.
There isn't, I'm afraid, unless we paid for it. I'm afraid.
Right.
Okay, look, I think we've got excellent reach here, and hopefully with good news on the spelling review. It's quite a way to run there. Okay, look, excellent. Thank you very much for noting. Thank you, Mark. Then, Mark, Planning and Housing Delivery Report.
Yeah, thank you, Simon. So just a few things to sort of bring out, and just a few updates. So obviously there's the usual update on the planning committee. So we've got the first session with the committee later on Central. So a bit of an important and hopefully exciting moment where the committee can start to see some of those plans for the first time. Obviously a bit of a journey for them. Obviously very hopeful of that session later. We are making some progress with the various nominations. Just to let people know, we had confirmation from KCC that Councillor Jordan Mead has been nominated as the KCC rep on the committee. I know he's a Gresham councillor as well, so that's in with the nomination for Lauren and for the independent members as well. So we're trying to do what we can in terms of moving that through the ministry. Section 3, the usual update on the development sites. I suppose just to give you a bit of a flavour in terms of work at the moment, the team have probably got reserved matters for just under 1,000 homes. So there's quite a lot going on. There's quite a lot of submissions that were sort of happening over the summer time. The fast track connection actually through Ashmere and Alcadon, so to connect the section to Castle Hill to the Blue Water Tunnels is now with us. Obviously keep bit of infrastructure there. We still are expecting the community buildings in Ebbsfleet Green and the market centre, so the shops around Alcadon, to be submitted hopefully over the next few weeks as well. We had some really good sessions with Countryside recently, who are obviously doing the joint venture with Clarion on Ashmere and some future phases which they're looking to bring forward hopefully a little bit sort of sooner than they planned. We had a good session actually with KCC Gen 2 on the emerging school at Cable Wharf on Tuesday, so trying to learn some lessons from what happened on Ebbsfleet Green and the communication and the way in which we sort of engaged in that process. So that's hopeful. The land should be transferred over to KCC in the coming months with the application submitted by the end of March. Just to make the board aware, and I know that John's aware, we are having a bit of an uplift in terms of various enforcement complaints and sort of concerns coming from the community, primarily around Norfolk West. Ian and I saw Bellway yesterday to flag all of those issues, and they're going to be doing a bit of communication with the residents around there. There's a development platform going in to deliver the Bellway scheme, and concerns about noise and dust and vibration and things. So all of those are definitely being responded to. In terms of the resort, obviously a few updates from when I wrote the paper. LRCH did write to the examining authority a couple of weeks ago and have mentioned a 5-week consultation period on new and updated plans kicking off on the 3rd of January. So we would obviously be hoping to work with them through any sort of work that they can release to us in advance of that. But then there would then be the 3rd of January for 30 days, and then they would then be planning to submit the revised information, additional information examining authority on the 18th of February. So then the prelim meeting, so the next key meeting would then be sort of around sort of March, April time. Interestingly, there hasn't been a response from PINS on that yet, that I can see on the website earlier, but I would expect that the PINS will probably release something soon. The Dartford plan, I think I briefly mentioned that in 5.1. Yeah, we're expecting the Regulation 19 consultation to kick off from today for 6 weeks, so we'll be reviewing that. That's primarily responding to the SSI, yeah, obviously there's the usual update in terms of numbers, so 246 completions so far. Looking across the year, it sort of feels as though we're relatively well placed for the 525 number, which is a business plan target for the year. Happy to take any questions, Chair.
Right, Board, any questions?
Just on that, on completions, 67 last month, which is good, above the average we need. And it looks as though it carries on at roughly the same rate. We're going to beat the target, but the question really is, how confident are you that we will beat the 525 target?
Yeah, it's interesting because I think that the developer forecast is still forecasting just over 600. When I've looked at the numbers recently, it feels like we are closer to the 525, but just over, rather than necessarily the 600 number. We typically do the mid-year review in October, so we'll do a bit of number crunching then. But obviously, there's an awful lot of schemes coming forwards. There isn't any particular delays being flagged by the developers across the board. There's just a few bits of sort of slippage in different locations. For example, we're expecting the apartments over the new scheme at Castle Hill to have been sort of technically locked as a completion by now. We haven't actually got confirmation of that, and we don't want to give you guys the numbers until we actually know that it is completed. So there are some chunky numbers still to come forward, but I think it will be over the 525, but possibly not by too many.
We've got 246, I think, over 5 months, and we get to about 5, well, above the 525, but under 600.
Yeah, that's where I think we're
But well, that's good. We beat the target. That's great.
Absolutely. Yes, absolutely. That's what we aim for.
You've detected Mark's optimism vibes.
we had discussed about whether or not we should consider a kind of a stretched.
Yeah,
perhaps we should give it some more thought at the next board meeting and see where we are on a run rate basis.
Yeah, I think we have got winter.
Yeah,
who knows what happens in January, February.
We know there are labour shortages, there's material shortages, so.
The question really, the premise behind the question was, we're doing well. If you project it forward, we'll do it, but we don't know whether you can project forward. We know the number of starts, but if there are labour shortages and other issues, so it looks to me as though we're doing all right, but let's not be confident or set ourselves too high hurdle to jump.
Yeah, I think we should have another look, probably the next board meeting, and see where we are.
Yeah, we normally do the mid-year review, obviously, in October, so yeah, we can do that.
Great. All right, Nick.
It may have been in previous papers, but on your 525 target, what is the mix? What is the 10%?
Okay, that definitely wasn't in the paper because I don't know the answer. Generally the affordable housing increase is generally coming forward at around 25% at the moment. So we can confirm the percentage of affordable. I know the KPI talks about 30%, but it's generally coming forward at around 25%.
Because we feel we should get that dynamic in terms of what is coming forward in terms of what to 5 bed.
Yeah,
we definitely got
525. 525 one beds is a lot easier.
Yeah,
I've got a very long spreadsheet on it, so I can certainly provide that next time.
Yeah, can we extract it from the very long spreadsheet?
That's fine.
And the intermediate as well as affordable.
Yeah.
I think it would be good. In the next report, Mark, it would be useful if you could break it down by tenure type, where you've got Mark, and also within tenure types, also 1, 2, 3 bed type. Just give us a bit more going.
Well, I think in the past, Mark, you've given us an indication as to whether this may come through in a slightly more chunky way than others, because it might be a part of building the voice part of the start that we finish. So something that gives us some granularity, I suppose, which will help both our view on total as well as that split.
Yeah, sure, we can include that in the
My final question on a slightly curly basis is how many of these 525 needs Help to Buy? 3 years. How much do we think is Help to Buy? What's our do we have a policy prognosis as to post Help to Buy life? Presumably, but everything we're doing is help.
Well, there'll be some value caps here, won't there? So, yeah, the value cap. It would be good for people to understand where the value cap are on market sale
So is it
and what it's affecting.
280, yeah.
When we've looked at Help to Buy before, the percentage has been quite high, but we've struggled to pin it down because of the way in which the data's released. I think when we did this stuff before, it was released against the boroughs rather than necessarily getting too much information from the house.
What might be useful there, it's a good point, it's when you come with the next report, because you let us know where the value cap is locally. So therefore, and we've got a price per square foot and we know what sales prices are for market sale, we can see that in reality, Help to Buy is 2-bedroom houses or apartments, or whether or not it extends into the 3-bed. Probably isn't extending through. When I was down the countryside, sort of 3-bedroom homes were there about £500,000 or so. National so it'd be good to understand where those kind of break points are.
Yeah, there's always been a value difference between this area and some of the sites over in Gratian. So yeah, we can probably try to give a bit of granularity in the public development sites.
Yeah, that'll be good.
Yeah.
We did certainly used to ask that question, Mark, years ago, and it was running at something like 50% Help to Buy.
Yeah, we always discuss the overall percentage.
The overall percentage was surprisingly high, though, even with the barriers, and the average was quite really good.
Yeah, Help to Buy 2 comes to an end at the end of March of 2023. So have to see what follows, if anything. Okay. All right, brilliant. So in terms of that paper is for noting, it's duly noted. That then brings us on Julia, investment report.
Sure, thank you, Chair. So I think I'll just focus on a couple of key issues, taking the report as read. The first one is overall capital expenditure to date. I think I've previously said to Board that we did expect the first 6 months of the year to be very slow, and therefore to date we have spent 2.23 million. What I would say is that for this month, obviously this was to the end of August, I've already seen substantial invoices coming in which we expected to come in. So you will very soon see that figure double, and we will progressively move towards our target. Just to highlight a couple of things where Ian was saying about the work going on in terms of projects. Ebbsfleet Central, as Ian mentioned, we've got the strategic outline business case in with the ministry, and the team are working incredibly hard on the outline planning application and obviously the consultation on that. In terms of Thames Way, we're very much focusing on the pre-construction information and the EIA scoping and bringing that all together such that we can get a very robust outline business case ready to bring forward to Board. On Northfleet Riverside, perhaps I'll focus on 2 things to begin with. We had a rescheduled investment subcommittee this morning with the ministry. If you remember approving the Northfleet Embankment East and Northfleet Embankment West business cases, outline business cases, they were approved with the ministry this morning. So that was very good news that the team can progress on those. Just to pick up the point that Lara was talking about earlier, one of the key things that I had to demonstrate this morning to them was that the schemes that we're bringing forward are not going to displace jobs from elsewhere. It's about creating employment space that the community can then be able to be upskilled to go in and take those jobs. And that was a key point about the discussion this morning. But as I say, both of those moved through, so we need to, the team are now, have already started focusing on the full business cases. So those are the kind of issues that we're going to have to make sure go all the way through that. So that was a good morning this morning on that front. As I say, the other thing going on, huge amount of work going on Grove Road. We have the majority of the planning responses back from Environment Agency, Heritage England. So we've got various pieces of work just going on to answer the queries that we've got for planning responses. So that's one work stream of work. We have got some pre-construction work going on. It is a little bit delayed just getting the contractor onto site where we need them. Alongside that, obviously we've got our developer selection as well, which we will be making a decision on in the second part of the board. So there's 3 very intense work streams going on there. All of that will culminate in us doing a full review of the cost plan and then reporting back to board when we're ready to do that. But all 3 of those work streams very much dovetail into that. I think one other thing I'd just like to highlight is we were talking about traffic earlier. On the A2 scheme, which if you remember, we've got a £45 million investment into that scheme. The main bridge being left took place in the last period, and that's a significant milestone for that project. And I've got a member of staff working very closely with what's now National Highways rather than Highways England on the cycling and walking schemes which are alongside that, which we are co-funding with them, and also on the landscaping works that we've previously approved in the business cases here. So it's about a full comprehensive picture all coming together. And as I say, very good progress being made on that particular scheme. They have had the hiccups with challenges with the bridge beam, but I think that's a positive step forward. So I think that's probably a summary of where we are on the schemes. I'm going to ask Mark to assist me in the next item, which is 2.5, which is the Grove Road handling arrangements. There has been a further legal review, an update, which I have attached in the annex to this report, Annex 1, and we are asking that board approve these. So just as a reminder, this is because obviously we are both the planning authority, not plan making, just to get that right. But also we have got the development arm as well. So Mark, do you want to add anything on that?
Yeah, obviously the board have seen a previous version of this. Understandably, Daniel and Neil have challenged some of that, and we provided a paper as to how to interpret them. And then on the back of that, we then got some more independent QC advice, which was really helpful. So that's then fed into reviewing sort of terms of reference for working groups and for project boards internally, and then also this document. So it updates a few legal things. It also makes the document more, gives it a little bit more longevity, because obviously there isn't only the outline to consider, there's any reserved matters conditions, and it just sort of gives the document a little bit of sort of longevity around thinking around how the whole scheme is going to build out rather than just necessarily the outline. And there's a few updates just in terms of personnel. So we'll obviously be looking to bring other ones of these to you guys for other parts of the guidance decision.
Great, thank you for that. Neil and Daniel, are you happy with these handling arrangements?
Yes.
Broadly, yes. Did you hear that?
Good. Any provisos or thoughts?
I have a detailed comment, but I've made it in writing, and Ian and Mark got that. And I think it's necessary. It's not really desirable, but it's necessary.
I think it's worthwhile just making the point to each other if I can. Obviously, they are live documents, so as things change internally and personnel changes and and bits and bobs pop up, we obviously will be updating them. So we can obviously reflect Neil's point, which is just around the way in which Ian's described the document in terms of its role in relation to the LTA function.
All right. Okay. Excellent.
Can I ask a question around indemnity, which in our this morning around indemnities from developers and contractors we're working with. So we're about to embark now on that process of Grove Road. So can you just give us a bit of background as to how we're handling that? Because I got a sense that there was some issues to be resolved around indemnities and how we obtained those in our use status, I guess.
So in order for our contractor to do the work, it's fine on the sites that we own, and obviously we own 50% of the total site. What we're trying to do at the moment, one of the biggest areas we need to do investigation work on is around North Victoria Harbour, which is owned by the Environment Agency. Probably what you were talking about, Eric, this morning was around in order any contractor goes onto site, you indemnify the landowner against any risks or events that might occur. Normal practice is that you would expect the contractor, because they're in control of the works, to indemnify the agency. What we are tending to find, not only on Grove Road and on other areas, is that organisations are expecting the EDC to indemnify as well, which is a bit odd, government department to government department. So in particular on Grove Road, Environment Agency, with Balfour Beatty, who are our contractor, have given the indemnification. We've agreed on the risk assessments. We've had a request that the EDC indemnify the Environment Agency as well. We've hit a bit of a kind of logjam on that, but we have escalated that within the Environment Agency to say this is not the usual way to do practice, and especially to a government department, but that is causing us some delay now within some period of time. So.
All right.
Thank you.
Okay, good. All right. So this paper is for a decision. We're noting performance, but we're also approving the Grove Road project handling arrangements. Can I assume that we're all happy with that? Good. Then that just brings us on to Gerard, Finance and Operations.
Thank you, Chair. The report in front of you shows the position as at the end of August. We're on section 2. We're predicting to spend all of our revenue allocation from the ministry, as well as being able to utilise our receipts. The detail is shown in Annex A. The thing I would probably highlight, picking up on the point that Mark made, we have got a large slice of the budget in against the DCO, the Development Consent Order process. If the timescales of that start to slip beyond March, then we will need to see how we manage the budget across potentially 2 years. So we will do that as part of our mid-year review, so that will come out very shortly. The capital budget Julia's already mentioned, and Ian's referred to some of the staffing issues that are outlined in section 4, but there have been some recruitments going on. Apart from that, we've mentioned the board issues and the various planning committee appointments that we're still awaiting approval for. So happy to take any questions.
Right, board. Any questions? No? Look, Gerard, thank you very much for that. Very clear and straightforward as always. I think that then brings us towards the end of the part 1 part of this meeting. We had received a number of written questions from the public, which we will be responding to in the normal way there. And indeed, now that we're meeting together, the public are always very welcome to join us here in our offices to participate in the proceedings. No one here today, but we would hope that they come and join us in due course. So I think that then brings us towards the end of it. Any other business, I think just for this meeting, we did circulate a corporate plan to board members for them to have a look at. I think work had been done on just getting that into a form with our graphic designers and the like in order to be able to be released. I think that is almost completed. I think really just looking if there are any comments on that presentation, whether people are frankly just happy for us when the work in setting it up and checking for any typos and the like is completed for us to get that out into the public domain. Any thoughts? I think we can see that in AOB the board has approved the corporate plan and the draft circulated, and that it should be released at the earliest possible opportunity. All right, that then brings, yes.
And note the encouraging call from the Minister as well.
It was, absolutely. We are we're in the middle of a spending review, so let's get our corporate plan now, but actually. So, good timing. It's not a let it languish in someone's inbox. Good. Thank you for all the hard work in getting it ready to get released. All right, good. That brings us to the end of this. We'll stop recording. Thank you for joining us today.